What's up, guys? Thanks for clicking on this video and checking out a speed paint of David Martinez from the new series, Cyberpunk Edgerunners. I myself really loved the series and enjoyed it. I know a lot of other people did, so I thought it'd be fun to challenge myself and try to do a speed paint of David Martinez, the protagonist from that series. And so just a disclaimer, I do want to say that I'm not the best at painting. I rely heavily on lines and line art, as all of my background as an artist is in creating comics, which heavily relies on line art. So I'm not the best painter, but I do think the piece turned out pretty good for what it is, and you guys can let me know what you think at the end of the video in the comments.
Okay, so the first thing you're going to be seeing me do here is what we call thumbnails, which is basically just extremely simplistic composition, trying to set up sort of a composition to decide what the pose is going to be, background a little bit. And I'm not the best at creating thumbnails, and I really did not put effort into these. I just wanted to try to speed through them and figure out something. And I ended up going with, as you'll see, I ended up going with the bottom right one because for those who haven't seen the series, the main character has like a spine augment essentially on his back, which is sort of a main part of his character and of the story. So I wanted that to be featured in my art, and it's a simple pose, but it let me focus on sort of trying to just render the character a little bit better rather than just being dynamic with it. So I'm just doing a rough sketch. So now that I've finished up with my thumbnail and I've decided what thumbnail I was going to use, I am now going into the sketching bit where I get a little bit more detailed with some pencil and just try to figure out the design of the character. And I was looking at just a little bit of reference because I didn't trust my memory with getting the character design entirely right. And you saw also that I really was screwing up the body, and I completely erased it to redo the sketch because I just was not convinced, which is one of the greatest tips that I could give as an artist is to not be afraid to erase pieces of work, because before learning how to erase, I promise you that I was not able to put out nearly as impressive of artwork, because your eraser is your friend as an artist, simple as that. So after finishing up the sketch layer, now we're going into inking on a separate layer, which is one of the greatest advantages of digital art, is being able to keep everything on separate layers. So that way, if you screw up on one part of your art, you can just get rid of it without having to affect anything else. And you'll see me make kind of a big mistake here. So normally it's recommended to keep your background, everything in the background, on a completely separate layer as your foreground. The foreground in this case being the character David Martinez, and the background being this. It's just basically supposed to be an alleyway, I guess, in Night City, which is the setting. It's like a futuristic. I think the year in the series is 2076. So it's like a future dystopia type neon city that he's in, and I didn't really look at much reference for that. I just sort of put together a background that I just was able to come up with in my head, essentially. But I wasn't too focused on the background, so it's just not the focus. And you'll see also a little bit later in the video that I use color and contrast to really make the character pop out, and the background sort of to blend and disappear, so that way the character remains the focus. Okay, so with inks out of the way and pretty satisfied with what it's looking like so far, I now go into what are called color flats, which is just what it sounds like. Basically, it's your layer where you're just going to put flat colors with no shading or highlights or anything like that, because those go on separate layers as well. Again, using our advantage of being digital artists by keeping everything on separate layers. And I go with quite bold color choices for my color flats, because oftentimes I generally prefer to use less saturated colors. I just kind of like that more for my own art style. But this is Cyberpunk after all. This is Night City, a neon city. It's all about them bright colors, so we got to bring the punch with those colors here. So, I used to make my life really complicated when it came to shading, because I used to do everything manually, where what I would do is I would select a color from my color flats, and then I would go into the color wheel, and I would try to manually select a color that was the same hue, but a different shade, right, of that color, so I could then put in my shading. Don't do that. Learn from my mistake. The easiest way to do shading is just to have a layer that I literally have a layer, you can see in the bottom right corner that I have a layer that's just called shading, and you lower the opacity to that on that layer to whatever you prefer, somewhere in the 50s range, and then you just get a black marker or a black whatever you're using, and you just draw right on top of your character. And as long as that shading layer is on top of your color flats layer, it will automatically, because the opacity is lowered so that the black is somewhat transparent, it does exactly what I was doing before manually, but saving you that extra step. So again, use your tools, use your brain, think smart, work smart, not hard. So at this point in the art process, I was starting to think that I wanted to find a way to try to make it look less comic booky by doing something with that line art layer. And what I did is I created another layer over the line art layer, and then I clipped it to that layer. So there's an option in digital painting software where you can clip one layer to the layer below, and it makes it so that whatever you do on that layer, it will only affect the layer below, essentially. So if that makes sense. Sorry, I'm not the best at explaining it, but a lot of you already know what I'm talking about anyway. So I used a layer that was clipped to my line art layer, and I used a gradient red on the side where there's red lighting, and blue on his backside where there's blue lighting, to kind of make the line art less prominent by having it sort of blend in and having it turn into more of a highlight almost in that way. Then I get to my highlights layer, and this is where I start to go a little bit too crazy with that airbrush. I don't know what I was thinking, but I went a little bit hard on the highlights layer, using an airbrush to throw in more blues and reds and such with that really heavy contrast and really bright colors. I realized after a little bit that I took a little bit too far, both with that lighting effect, and then also I wanted to add like a sort of an electrical effect with a brush that I found on Clip Studio Assets that is just like it basically brushes streams of electricity for you, so you don't have to, again, advantages of digital art, baby. Got to use your resources. But I went too hard with it. I took the electricity a little bit too far. You'll see that I actually ended up deleting that layer entirely after realizing that I wasn't really pleased with what it was doing, and I ended up going with a different strobing, I think that's what it's called, a strobing kind of effect later, which is a callback more to the series and the way that David uses his augment in the show. So we're in the final stretch now of this piece of art, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a layer on top of everything, and I'm going to lower the opacity on it just like I did with the shading layer, and I'm going to put just some flat colors over the entire foreground and over the entire background. And so the color that I put over the entire background was purple, and the color that I put over the entire foreground was yellow. But then by lowering that opacity, it just gives it a very, very light hue of that color. And since it's over everything else that is in the foreground and background, it sort of melds all of those colors together. That's what the purpose of doing that is. And then from that layer, I use my magic wand to select the silhouette of David Martinez and use that to get my strobing effect that I was talking about. I'm not sure if it's actually called a strobing. The after image thing. Anyway, the stylistic bit. So I grab that and I copy that selection a couple of times, change the colors on it, and sort of shift around those silhouettes of him to produce the effect that you'll see at the end, which I was pretty happy with. I like that a lot. And then, yeah, for the rest of this video, basically, I just do a little bit of touch-ups. I redo my highlights layer entirely by being a little more sparing with that electricity, because while cool, when you add so much like I did originally, it just sort of, you lose the effect. It loses its coolness, because things that are cool don't come in such an abundance. Anyway, so yeah, you'll see me come up on the finished piece here at the end. Again, paying attention to the video, you'll see that I did make tons of mistakes. I am honestly, in lots of regards, a novice at this, but I had loads of fun doing it, and I think the art is cool. I think it's cool, at least. I hope you guys too. So anyway, thanks for watching this. I hope you enjoyed the art. I hope maybe you learned something, or also, I want to learn. I want to get better at painting, since that's not my forte. So if you got some tricks, if you saw me do something just egregious during this recording, and you just were like, dude, what you doing? Like, please comment it and let me know what I was doing wrong or what I could do better to work smarter, not harder. Thank you, guys.